In today's Locked On Pelicans, I'm going to tell you why the second preseason game exposed a big concern here in New Orleans and why I think the Pels are maybe going about preseason in the wrong way. It's a Tuesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans in NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Tuesday, no Monday show. If you were on Twitter over the weekend, you saw some personal news. Some of that just kind of precluded me from doing a show on Sunday night, Monday morning after the second preseason game. So we're getting to it a little bit late this week, but we'll try and do a bonus show this week to make up for the one missed on Monday. But thank you to all the congratulations, by the way, if you know what I'm talking about here. You can go to Twitter to find all of that out. So I want to talk about the Pelicans losing to the Miami Heat in their second preseason game, 99-101. There were two concerns that came out of this to me, and we'll talk about those. But the good thing to keep in mind, if you just want the too long didn't listen, too long didn't watch, Zion looked good, and that's still the most important thing. And we'll really get the true test of this Pelicans team in tonight's game, the final game against the Houston Rockets. So we're going to break it all down in today's episode. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, coming to you like nobody else does. So this week, we'll have a show every week. Next week's going to be a little weird. I'm going to be doing some driving. Let's just leave it at that. And so I'm going to miss the first opening game in person, but I will be watching it, kind of recording from a hotel room or something like that after the fact. So bear with me. This week will be fine. Next week might be a little bit rough. Bear with me through that, and then we'll be ready to go basically around the end of that first week of basketball here. But we'll have shows for you every single day. So let's get into this game. 101-99 loss to the Miami Heat. This game, if you're looking for reasons to be pessimistic, this game had it. This was a game that gives you big-time concerns about New Orleans. Now, some of this is also hypothetical. They're still without Brandon Ingram, and we'll touch on that in a minute here, and Trey Murphy's who's hurt. And that influences this. When you looked at this game, small ball didn't work. Now, the game was close, partially because in the second half, they staged a comeback, and you had some of these bench guys going up against other bench guys, or guys that aren't even going to be on the team going up against other guys that aren't going to be on a team. You don't want to read too much into that. The final score here doesn't matter. The big concern was the Pelicans starters. If you're an everydayer, if you're a recent listener too, you've probably heard me say this. The starters need to win their minutes. They cannot have another season like they did last year, which is the bench beating up on a lot of other teams. You need your starters to win their minutes. The starters didn't look good in this game. Now, it was the starting lineup of DeJounte Murray, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, and Daniel Theis, and we don't think that that's going to be the opening night lineup, but the starters did not look good here. Daniel Theis as a starting center did not get it done, and you couldn't really make up for that, particularly against a strong center in Bam Adebayo. This was a game where small ball just didn't work. Look, they didn't rebound particularly well, at least the starters. The bigs here in the starting lineup, Zion Williamson and Daniel Theis, didn't do a great job of rebounding. We weren't expecting them to. They had combined for 5 between them. That's not great. But if you're going to play small ball, you're going to give up in certain areas. One of them is going to be rebounding. That's how it goes. The Golden State Warriors in their death lineup was a bad defensive rebounding unit. They made up for it in other areas, however. So you figure you give up something in rebounding, but you make it up in three-point shooting, you make it up in offense or what have you. But that's the thing. They didn't in this one. Small ball works if you have the offense, the spacing, the shooting. They didn't. And so if you don't have that and you're losing the rebounding battle, it's not going to go well for you. And it gives the Pelicans a bit of a feeling of boom or bust here. That's essentially the story of this game to me. They played small and it didn't work. Now, here's the thing with that. I don't know how much stock we should put into it just yet. Ingram's not playing, and that's looking more and more like an incorrect decision. Whether, that was the team saying it, whether that was Brandon Ingram saying that, whatever. The decision to not have him play until tonight's game against the Houston Rockets looks like an incorrect one to me. The moment that Trey Murphy III got hurt, they should have just been playing Brandon Ingram. You can see the lack of spacing. The starters out there did not look good. They were playing 4-on-5 because Daniel Theis doesn't really impact the defense whatsoever. So I'm less worried about this from the sense of, I want to evaluate lineups and things like that. No, I think you just need to get an idea of if you can play small effectively or not. And we don't have an answer to that question right now. And a lot of that is because they're not going to run their starting lineup out until the final preseason game. But when guys are only playing 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half essentially, you're not going to get the data you need off of one game. So we'll talk about this game more in the third segment of today's show because it is really important. But they should have been playing Brandon Ingram, and they should have just been starting that small ball lineup that we think is going to be the opening night group. And right now, that's DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Herb Jones. The Friday show is about Herb Jones basically being your center, and why I think that's misleading. Go give that a listen if you haven't already. You need to have an idea, though, if you can play small or not on opening night. You don't want to go into the season being like, boom or bust, let's go, let's find out what happens. I want that. I don't think you, a Pelicans fan, want that. Maybe people around the league are like, yeah, this will be an interesting experiment. I'm not invested in the outcome either way, so go for it. We're invested. I'm invested. The fans of the Pelicans are invested. That's not a way to go about doing this. The second that Trey Murphy injury occurred, they should have been playing Brandon Ingram to get a better sense of will this work or won't it, because you need that shooting, you need that spacing. You can give up boards. You can give up boards as long as you're killing it in other areas. But in this game against the Miami Heat, they weren't killing it in really any area. They shot 9 of 37 from three, and a lot of those three-point attempts were guys off of the bench. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl took 6 in this game. The starting lineup had Zion Williamson and Daniel Theis in there, and each took 1 3. If you take Theis out of there and you put Trey Murphy or Brandon Ingram, who's supposedly going to be shooting threes, that changes the calculus on this pretty quickly. And as good as we feel DeJounte Murray is going to be for this team, the offense was clunky with him running it, and he didn't shoot particularly well. 1 of 3 from deep. He's now 1 of 7 from 3 in these 2 preseason games so far. You need that shooting. You need that scoring. It's not with Daniel Theis out there on the court. It needs to be Brandon Ingram, but we haven't seen him through these first 2 games. So whatever the reason not to play him, whatever the reason, maybe that was because they're worried about him getting hurt. Maybe he's worried about getting hurt. What have you? It shows it's the wrong decision if the Pelicans go out on opening night and look like it's the first preseason game. Maybe they work some of the kinks out of this in this game against the Houston Rockets, but you need more of a sample size than that. And if that unit's playing against backups or Houston's not playing their starters, it's not a real good test to know if it works or not. So it feels like we're going to be going into game 1 of the regular season with a whole bunch of question marks and not a ton of answers. And that's not ideal. Now, losing a preseason game doesn't help you here, but still. There was a better way to go about this, and I think the Pelicans are have approached preseason in the wrong way here. So while this is an open concern and I have done things differently, the most important thing in this game was a positive, and that's Zion Williamson. So let's look at some of the good performances that came out of this game against the Miami Heat. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by my go-to ticketing app, Game Time. Whether it's postseason baseball, the start of the NBA regular season, maybe you're a big hockey fan, or maybe you just like live events. Game Time is the app that I use for everything because they have so many features, and that's what I love. It just makes it really easy to buy tickets. And one of their new features is called Game Time Picks, and that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They're just going to show you the best deals at really good prices. What I also love is the view from your seat. So maybe you're going to a concert or a comedy show or a theater show at a venue you've never been to before. Are you getting the seats that you want? You can see the panoramic view from your seats before you buy. And you can also toggle the all-in pricing. So there's going to be the final price up front, no hidden fees or surprises. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Never miss a show. Even though we missed one on Monday, there was a good reason for it. Come on. Again, thank you to everyone who said congratulations and reached out, whether it was just on Twitter or if you have my number, something like that, shooting me a text. I appreciate all of the love there. That made me feel very, very good and very, very special. And it's an exciting time. I'm also excited right now because of Zion Williamson and how he has looked in preseason so far. To me, more so than anything else, than the small ball, whatever, Zion looking good is the biggest deal for this team. I think they've gone about preseason the wrong way. I don't love the approach that they've taken. We still don't know if small ball will work. Here's the thing we feel good about. Zion. I've been saying this. His season started in January last year. After that loss in the in-season tournament to the Los Angeles Lakers, he started really working harder than he ever had been before, and he's ready to go by January, where he played incredibly well through the end of the regular season until that injury. It would be really nice, though, to have Zion Williamson be ready on game one. And guess what? He's going to be. He looks incredible right now. He looked good for the Pelicans in this game. He's never going to be an elite rebounder. Don't expect that from him. But 13 points, being a team high in 17 minutes, 5 of 10 shooting, making all of his free throws, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, a block. He looked good. I like that he took a 3. He had a mid-range jumper over Bam Adebayo, which was a good look as well. Zion looks ready to go. We can complain about small ball. We can complain about Brandon Ingram not playing. Here's the thing. With a talented player like Zion Williamson ready to go and being an impactful guy and a game changer for you, everything else will at least fall into place a little bit. Maybe lacking a center or lacking a true identity offensively, small ball, not small ball, whatever, means they will hold them back from their full potential. But having a healthy player like Zion Williamson doing what he's doing by itself is usually enough to get you towards the play-in tournament. If other things start to fall into place and they figure it out and they get the answers to some of those questions we were just talking about in the first segment, then you're a 6 seed. Then you're out of the play-in tournament. So the ceiling for this team, I do think, remains pretty high, provided that they do figure it out. And that's going to be the important thing. Remains to be seen. We'll talk more about this game tonight, coming up here in the next segment of Locked On Pelicans. But Zion looking good at least raises, it sets your floor, right? That's what I'm trying to say. It sets your floor. It puts you at least at 500 if Zion is the Zion that we're seeing in preseason the whole regular season. He'll miss some games here and there. That's bound to happen. But Zion looking as good as he does puts you at 500 at the minimum. That's a pretty important thing with the other talent, too, around him, right? That's kind of what's going on here. So overall, I still feel very bullish on this team and very good about where they can end up because Zion looks that good. Him hitting that mid-ranger is good. Him taking the 3, at least attempting them and trying to kind of get into a rhythm with that and taking those shots is going to be a good thing. Don't only do all of that. Get to the line, make your free throws, which he did in this game, which was great to see. That's what's going to take them pretty far. But work those other things in there here and there to keep those defenses honest. And look, make a 3 if you can. That's never going to be a bad thing. And if he does figure the rebounding out, that's going to be an important thing for him too, because then it means you can play much more small and things like that. And I think that'll be an important thing for the Pelicans in this one. But the starting unit does need to try and figure that out, or figure out if they can play super duper fast and small. And if they can, screw the rebounding. You'll beat them on offense. You'll just win shootouts like the Indiana Pacers. And frankly, stressful, but kind of fun when it comes to that. The Pacers are one of my favorite teams to watch, and they don't play a lick of defense. they were good last year, right? They made a decent, showing in the postseason, I thought. Other guy who looked good in this game actually was Yves Missi in a strange way, playing 15 minutes off the bench. You can see why New Orleans drafted him, and this game was really to show you. He had 4 blocks in this one, including one with his left hand, which is pretty great for an offhand. He showed you the rim protection, the athleticism that you want to see. Still looked lost out there. Looked really, really lost, but he didn't commit fouls. And one of the things that I've really heard repeatedly from people around the organization is that he picks up things quickly. If he can develop fast and get out there on the court, that's going to be a big boon for the New Orleans Pelicans with the defensive presence that he provides. He's going to be a big body that should be able to rebound pretty well too. But if he gives you shot blocking, oh boy, does that really change the game for how good the defense of the Pelicans can be. They've been good without shot blocking for a while now. And if you can add that in, when it frees you up to do other things defensively, that could mean more turnovers. You can take more gambles on steals and things like that. So seeing the shot blocking come to fruition in just his second preseason game is encouraging. I think it also sheds some light this game on what you see the center rotation being. The order goes Daniel Tice, Jeremiah Robinson Earl in that Larry Nance Jr. role, then Yves Missi, and then maybe Carlo Makovich, who did not play in this game. I think they wanted to give Missi that run. I think they really would like Jeremiah Robinson Earl, JRE, to be a guy for them. TBD on that one. I don't think he's looked particularly good in preseason. He was 1 of 6 from 3 in this one, 2 of 7 overall. Didn't give you a single rebound. If they wanted to play that Larry Nance Jr. role, I just don't think that is what they should do with Jeremiah Robinson Earl. I might play Yves Missi over him, and we'll talk a little bit about the center rotation in the next segment too, going into tonight's game, because I wonder if this is going to be more of like a dress rehearsal where we'll really get a sense of what the rotation's going to look like and who's going to get minutes. But they've been playing a ton of Jeremiah Robinson Earl off the bench here. When Trey's healthy, when Brandon Ingram is healthy, are they going to do that? And I think the answer is probably no, because if you're not starting Daniel Tice, you can have him do a lot more of that JRE role, and that means fewer minutes for JRE. And given how things have gone, probably the way to go for this team, I think. So I don't want to see a ton of minutes from him in the regular season. Missi is the one I'm really intrigued about when it comes to these guys, because it does look like if he can block shots like that, if he can figure out rebounding, he will earn a place on the court. The fact that he did not get into foul trouble in this game, despite a bunch of miscues and just being lost out there at times on the court. There were a couple moments where he just looked like he had no idea where he was or what he was doing. And that's fine. He's a rookie. You're not expecting that from him. But I do think the center rotation, if it's Daniel Tice, JRE, Missi, Carlo, will be different when Brandon Ingram is playing, when Trey Murphy is playing, and you only really need 2 of them, 1 of them, and that might just be Daniel Tice at that point in time, which I think would be a good thing for the New Orleans Pelicans to kind of shorten that center rotation, given the lack of just like true talent at that spot. For their like center positional grouping here, it's probably the worst in the league. So you don't want to be playing 2-3 guys from that group if you can avoid it. And as long as Zion looks good, and if you can make that starting lineup be effective, you need Daniel Tice to come in off the bench here and there, and it minimizes some of that, lack of talent at the center spot. And that I think ends up being a good thing. Also in this game, shout out Elfrid Payton coming in, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, couple of points. It was cool to see him out there. I don't think he's going to make the regular season roster or anything like that. I don't really think there's going to be any surprises. They do have an open roster spot. Maybe he impressed him enough with the assist to be more of a backup point guard, but that's definitely Jose Alvarado's role. He was pretty good in this one, 9 points off of the bench there. Continues to be one of the more impactful players for the team. You saw Trey Jemison kind of get out there and get some run. Antonio Reeves got a little bit of run too, which was good to see. But guys like Malcolm Hill aren't going to be making the opening night roster. So we don't really need to get too much into these other performances. We want to look at, the main guys on the team. Starters struggled, some other bright spots overall. But this game coming up tonight against the Houston Rockets, where Brandon Ingram is going to be playing, this one's the important one. Let's talk about that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Pelicans fans, NBA fans, Saints fans, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And all you have to do is go to FanDuel.com. Opening night, Lonzo Ball is going to be playing. They might shift the line. You might want to just get it at 6.5 right now, or maybe it'll shift another way. So you can bet the opening night line right now, and you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you have to do is go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And of course, for your second listen today. Oh boy, Sunday. That's why I couldn't do a show. I was so upset over the Saints game that I couldn't even record or anything like that. Spencer Rattler showed some promise. Everything else fell apart. Is it time to make some big changes? I saw hashtag fired Dennis Allen was trending. Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints, is going to tell you what they need to do to kind of get this turned around or where the season is going to go. Go make Locked On Saints part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your second listen today. So the Pelicans have their final preseason game tonight against the Houston Rockets. It is going to be on the Golf Course Sports and Entertainment Network. That is like a mouthful. I'm getting used to saying it. So you'll be able to watch this for free, which is really great if you get that channel. I believe there's going to be some news on Lafayette this week, by the way. So hopefully it'll maybe be announced, I don't know, today. We'll find out. But still, that's coming soon. So as long as that gets sorted for the regular season. Take it on the Houston Rockets. This will be the first real true test for New Orleans. I'm hopeful, we'll see if this is what they do, that they start the small ball lineup, that it's going to be DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Herb Jones. If that is the case, do the starters look good? And if they do, I'm going to feel better about the opening night against the Chicago Bulls. This is the dress rehearsal. This is the game that matters, and that first quarter where it's starters versus starters is going to be really important to watch. We'll, of course, be breaking it down right here on Locked On Pelicans in tomorrow's show. But you want to see the starters look good. If they don't rebound well, that can be okay as long as you're scoring and blitzing the Houston Rockets. If you're not, if things look clunky again, I'm going to start to not panic, but be more nervous than I've been, and I've been pretty optimistic this offseason. This is the true test of that, though. This needs to go well. If it doesn't, they might need to look into making a trade sooner rather than later, or just doing something to try and kind of plug that hole at center that feels like maybe it could be like that's the part where the dam's going to break or something along those lines. But let's see what it looks like in this game. If it goes well, I feel you can really build a strong team here and maybe go with that positionless basketball, an unconventional lineup that could lead to some really, really good results, I think, for the New Orleans Pelicans. But we'll find that out in this game. This needs to go well, though. You need to see Brandon Ingram shooting threes, doing all of the right things. This is his first opportunity to really start earning that contract. He wants a big deal. He wants all of the money. He knows he needs to shoot more threes. This is your opportunity to do it. By all accounts, in practice, in training camp, he has looked good. But that's training camp. This is an actual game where maybe you face some adversity in it. You know, if he's frustrated and the shot's not falling, do you keep sticking with it? Do you keep shooting threes if you go 0 for 3 to start? Or does he revert? Does he change? Is there going to be enough spacing for Zion Williamson? Will it look less clunky? Can DeJounte Murray run the offense with all of these guys? Is it you're going to have 4 guys who need to kind of be fed the ball and want the ball in their hands, and CJ and Murray and Zion and Ingram? CJ doesn't need it because he works better off ball. This is the time to find out. This is important. And then what does the center rotation look like if you start that small ball lineup? Is it only Daniel Tice that's going to come into the game? Is it Jeremiah Robinson Earl? Is it both? Does it need to be both? You'll see Missi in the second half. You'll see some of these other guys in the second half. But this is the game where we can go, okay, we're feeling good at least going into opening night, or there are going to be more questions than answers. And I don't know just yet. That's why this game's really important. That's why I think I'd like them to have done preseason differently. On that note, though, I do think it's worth saying, I'm not there watching every practice. None of the reporters are. None of the beat writers are seeing every single thing. When I talked to David Griffin on Media Day, one of the things I asked was, how do you evaluate a head coach? We only see the stuff in the games. We don't see the practices. We don't see the meetings. We don't see the film reviews. We don't see all of that stuff. And so maybe this is a team that's like behind the scenes going, we feel real good from what we're seeing, even though we're not running it out there in preseason. That could be the case. Well, we need to see it a little bit in all of this for us not to panic on opening night. But even if this doesn't go well for whatever reason, there's maybe something they know that we don't know. Maybe not the case. I'm trying to look for a glass half full approach to this sort of thing, but that could definitely be part of it. And so we'll see. This game, we are going to break it down in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans because I do think it is that important. Finally going to see Brandon Ingram out there on the court. That's only going to be a good thing. Let's hope it works. Let's hope we see some threes. Let's hope we see some space. Team rebounding too. Herb Jones guarding some centers and all that should be an interesting one. Şengün's not a guy that scares me a ton. He's not like a post-up player where you're worried about him feasting at the basket. So we'll find out. This is a good test for New Orleans, I think. This game matters. We're going to watch it. We're going to break it down right here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, and that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. I appreciate y'all so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to recap the final preseason game, and we're going to get set for the regular season this week and early next week. Got a lot to cover here on Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll see y'all tomorrow.